Mr. Darryl David.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I rise in support of the motion of thanks to the President. In his speech on how the government can build a strong partnership with people to co-create the Singapore of the future, President Halimah Yacob emphasized the need of the fourth-generation leaders to work with Singaporeans to build a vibrant Singapore that is full of opportunities and to create a cohesive and inclusive society that caters to the needs of different societal segments. Madam President also spoke about the importance of making Singapore a great place to have children and to enable people with differences to lead full and active lives. It is with this in mind that I would like to focus my speech on catering to the divergent and differentiated learning needs of a particular segment of children and how the government could enhance education options for these children, specifically those who are of primary school going age. I'd also like to declare my interest as CEO of a private education organization. Singapore has a well-regarded education system that is both recognized and admired worldwide. Bodies such as OECD consistently rate our education system as one of the best in the world, and, as we were reminded by the Education Minister in his speech, our students have achieved remarkable Programme for International Student Assessment, or PISA, results. The primary school system that we have built is well suited to cater to mainstream learners who are able to function and learn in what is predominantly an exam-based academic environment. In such a system, students who are able to perform well in summative assessments such as tests and examinations will do well, thus culminating in what most parents will agree is the mother of all summative assessments, the PSLE. I do not intend to comment on the PSLE in this speech. I believe that this has been commented on before and will indeed continue to be debated for some time in this chamber in the future. Indeed, I have to commend MOE for trying to lessen the exam-based academic aspect of PSLE by providing for schemes like the DSA to allow students to enroll in secondary schools using other criteria apart from their PSLE score. The replacement of the T-score with wider achievement levels in 2021 is also a positive step in the right direction. My point is that while the majority of neurotypical students in mainstream MOE primary schools tend to function well in this system, there are those neurodivergent students with differentiated learning needs who would perhaps perform better in an environment and system that are different from typical mainstream MOE primary schools. I'm not referring to students with clear special learning needs that are already enrolled in special education, SPED schools, such as those operated by APSN, MINDS, AWA, and other VWOs and NGOs. SPED school students often have moderate to serious physical and/or intellectual challenges that will make it difficult for them to make it in the mainstream education system, and it is good that MOE and MSF have worked with these organizations to provide options and opportunities for these students to form the foundation for independent and meaningful lives and careers. In 2004, MOE partnered with the Autism Resource Center to set up Pathlight School. The aim was to create the first autism-focused school in Singapore that offered Singapore's mainstream academic curriculum together with life readiness skills and to cater primarily to students with autism and related disorders. These students are cognitively able to access mainstream academic curriculum but require additional support such as smaller class sizes, special accommodation, and teaching staff trained in autism. Pathlight has since grown from strength to strength, thanks in no small part to the vision and tireless work of a lady that I have tremendous respect for, my honourable parliamentary colleague, Ms. Denise Phua. And I'm confident that Ms. Phua and her team will continue to light the path for many children and young adults on the autism spectrum in the future. The neurodivergent children I'm hoping that MOE can provide enhanced educational options for are those primary school students who have neurotypical conditions that are not so severe or challenging that would require them to enroll in SPEDS or Pathlight, but are presently finding it challenging to cope with these conditions in mainstream primary schools. Indeed, these students are not just able to merely grasp the mainstream primary school academic curriculum, many of them are even able to excel in it. Consider the case of 10-year-old primary 4 student Xavier Wong, who was featured in the Straits Times on May the 10th this year. Xavier, who is able to solve math problems that are 2 years ahead of his level and has an IQ that places him in the top 2% of the population, was diagnosed with mild attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and his behavior has at times proven to be disruptive to his classmates and teachers. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there are many children like Xavier with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, attention deficit disorder, sensory processing disorder, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Asperger's, autism, and other neuroatypical conditions who find aspects of mainstream primary school challenging. MOE has, in recent years, worked very closely with educational and developmental psychologists to offer early detection and interventions for children with special learning needs, and has also offered support programs in mainstream schools for students with dyslexia, mild autism, and ADHD. I sincerely hope that MOE will continue to do good work in this area, but I feel that these programs are still insufficient to cater to increasingly complex learning needs of our children. Furthermore, unless the allied educators to students ratio is lowered, it's also very hard for these allied educators to cater to the needs of working with such a large group of students in mainstream schools. The class sizes, environments, and curricula of the mainstream schools are also not ideal for neurodivergent students who have differentiated learning needs. I would thus like to ask MOE to consider facilitating the setting up of autonomous specialized primary schools to cater to these neurodivergent students so that these students are able to study in a specially designed and planned environment that caters to their unique learning needs. Aside from the environment and learning spaces, such schools could be given the freedom to design their own curricula, determine their own class sizes, hire their own staff with a specialized skill set, and even set their own fees. This would be in line with the Pathlight model, but perhaps on a smaller scale and with more autonomy given to the schools. I believe that there would be VWOs and NGOs like AWA or the Dyslexic Association of Singapore who would have the expertise and know-how to set up these autonomous specialized schools. Other organizations who might be inclined to provide such services would be, or could be, religious organizations or established private education providers, and interested parties could even be partnered with philanthropic organizations or charities or even corporate entities who are willing to co-fund this initiative. MOE could facilitate the setting up of these schools and could also further assist by working with the Singapore Land Authority to allow for these schools to be set up in the compound of vacant former MOE schools. Perhaps a cluster of smaller, autonomized specialized schools could even be housed in a single building to create a unique learning community for neurodivergent children. These schools could be set up with the same national education parameters and guidelines as the mainstream schools, with the same flag-raising ceremonies, the singing of the national anthem, the reciting of the pledge, and the incorporation of NE modules into the curriculum. I noted that my parliamentary colleague, Ms. Cheryl Chan, had earlier suggested for students with special needs to be given a through-train pathway to secondary school. I think that this is a suggestion worth exploring, but if MOE still feels that the PSLE is relevant to neurodivergent students, then students from these proposed autonomous specialized schools could still be required to take this exam. The key difference is that these schools would have the freedom and autonomy to prepare their students for the PSLE in the way that they deem would be best to cater to the students' diverse learning needs. I'm sure that there are some concerns that fees of these autonomous schools, if they are privately funded, for example, would price themselves out of the reach of students who need them the most. One of the ways that MOE could mitigate this concern is by mandating a tiered school fee structure where families who have the financial means will pay the full school fees of such schools, while families who are less well off could pay a subsidized rate, or they could qualify for bursaries from the school itself. It could also be mandatory for these schools to include a certain percentage of these students at subsidized fees. This, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in effect helps to ensure a more equal distribution of resources from the community, as those who have the means to afford such education would in effect be helping those who do not. And such guidelines would also ensure that these autonomous specialized schools could actually have a more diverse and varied student demographic than some primary schools from certain residential regions in Singapore today. So one can set up such schools and ensure that they remain accessible. Now this, I believe, is an idea worth piloting. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I would like to, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the early 2000s, MOE set out bold plans to transform the post-primary education sector. In less than 10 years, institutions such as the Sports School, School of the Arts, School of Science and Technology, NUS High, IP institutions, IB schools, and privately funded international schools were all set up. These schools and their programs have allowed students to explore many more tracks and pathways that cater to their learning needs, capabilities, and aspirations. In recent times, MOE has also made an impact in the pre-primary early childhood education sector by setting up MOE kindergartens and mega preschools to ensure a baseline quality for early childhood education, while still allowing private early childhood education options to exist. This has ensured variety and choice for parents who might want different types of education for their young children based on their preferences and whatever their children's needs might be. Having transformed the post-primary sector and with increasing involvement in the pre-primary sector, it now makes sense, in my opinion, for the government to go one step further and look at diverse options and pathways in the primary school system. I believe that diversity actually creates a stronger and more resilient system overall, which will in turn enhance the entire education ecosystem. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I'm not advocating a quote-unquote bold, radical revamp of the education sector. Indeed, I feel that the word bold has been somewhat overused in this chamber in the past few days. What I'm hoping for is for the government to continue the good work that is already done in our education landscape. What I'm hoping for is for an escalation of this progressive evolution with a focus on facilitating the creation of more primary education pathways for neurodivergent children. What I'm hoping for is for parents to have more choices and options in terms of how they would like to educate their children. And if we get the education of our children right, then we get the future of our country right. Thank you.